All right, guys, welcome back to another video here on, this is going to be on programming and how to understand code, how to go from, what seems overwhelming, because what inspired this video is I've seen a lot of comments of people, not only on this channel, but also online as well, talking about how, they don't understand the code and how it seems like it's too advanced and all that stuff, right? I'm going through the Black Hat Python 2nd edition right now, if you've seen those videos on the channel. And I know people are getting pretty overwhelmed by some of the code here. This is the code to a video I'm going to come out with pretty soon as I built a scanner. If you saw the videos, the last time I built this sniffer with ICMP to sniff ICMP packets, and pretty soon I'll be releasing this one on the scanner, basically taking a lot of this functionality but adding a UDP section in. And to the untrained eye, it could look pretty, like there's a lot going on. It could look kind of overwhelming, right? And it's important in that situation to really break down the code and understand. Don't get too overwhelmed, right? Just break it down into small pieces that you can understand and just kind of put things together. But more importantly, I'm going to show you guys how to understand any code and understand, even when we're using a lot of modules, right? Because one of the things that we're doing here, we're not reinventing the wheel, right? We're not recreating all this stuff from scratch. We're reusing code that people already built, right? That's why I'm importing all the libraries that I'm importing here, all the modules, right? I'm making use of the socket module. And pretty much any programmer, unless they're just doing it for like their own theoretical learning, they're going to reuse code as well, right? They're going to use the socket module when they're trying to do stuff with IPv4, IPv6, right? When they're doing networking stuff, because that code's already been written. And I know that some people, especially people that are newer, they feel that, if they don't know every detail of every implementation, that they don't know how to code and they don't understand code, and you have to understand every fine detail. You really don't, and I'll show you why in this video. What's up, guys? This is Ryan from elevatecyber. The first way I want to start this off is, from a Reddit post that I saw here. They're asking about Black Hat Python 2nd edition. Now, a lot of the comments in here, they're really just talking about how, you have to be super high level to understand it. Are there any prerequisites? Now, I mean, technically, yeah, you need to know some networking stuff for this book. Fair enough, right? I think all my viewers and all you guys watching, if you're into, the security side, right? I mean, chances are you understand what TCP is, what UDP is, and basic stuff like that, right? You don't have to have as in-depth knowledge to do this as you might think. And I'm about to show you why in this video. So let's go over some of these comments first, right? All right, so, like, for example, this comment here. It's not an entry-level book. He doesn't teach you anything. It's a good book with fantastic showcases, but will not really explain nothing. You need to be good at Python developing. Otherwise, you'll end up copy-pasting without understanding nothing. It's more a source code book. Wish to have more explanation. And I've even seen some comments on my own channel about, yeah, I wish there were more explanations. But here's the thing, right? So with a book like this, they will only explain certain parts of the code. Yeah, fair enough, right? But it's very easy to, honestly, I think that makes it more accommodating for someone that understands what a lot of this stuff is doing anyways. For example, I don't want to, someone made a comment also on the Reddit post about they should explain every line of code or it's not a learning book. And that's not true at all. Like, there's some prerequisite knowledge that, even if you don't have, you can quickly find it. But like, for example, something like this, right? It's like, hey, this is getting the version, or, something like this, right? Like, this is setting a subnet variable to this string here, right? This is setting a message variable to this string here, and we know that, right? And even if there's certain things you don't know, like, for example, if, we're dealing with the socket, module here, and you don't know what this is, right? You're like, what's sock.dgram? Because a lot of this is abstracted away, you can easily find that information. So what you would do, I'll show you, right? Learning how to read the documentation is very important in any programming language, right? So I just did a simple Google for Python 3 socket, and this is what I got, right? Now you can even change it for your specific version of Python. Now this is the documentation for the socket library. So say I don't know what the sock.dgram is, I can do a control F on this page, and I can look for that. Okay, these constants represent socket types used for the second argument to socket, right? More constants may be available depending on the system. And they're calling out specifically sockstream and sockdgram appear to be generally useful. So let's see what else we got. All right, here we go. Socket.socket, and then you can give it the type, right? It could be sockstream or any of the types we saw above, right? You could have sock.dgram. So I can even click on that, and that will take me to another area here. That was actually that was what we were looking at earlier, right? And so we can even come down here. Here's where, you know, they're using it in an example to a CAN network in this case, right? So you can kind of see like what it's doing, and as well, you could Google, right? You don't have to just rely on the documentation. So we could say socket.dgram Python, and then like, oh, okay, this is used for UDP, right? So there's multiple ways that you can find out this information. And another interesting thing, a third option available to you is it actually has a link to the source code. So this is the source code for this module. When you're importing this module, you're really importing this Python script, basically. And this will have all kinds of information if you really want to dive deep into the implementation that was being abstracted away from you before. You could actually see how they're actually implementing all the functionality in their libraries. And you can even see, okay, this part of the C Python library here, and also part of CPython are all these other things as well. Maybe there's some other modules that you imported and used, and a lot of things were abstracted, and you want to know what's happening under the hood, like, you know, Schlex. We've used Schlex before. We can look at the source code for that as well. So very easily accessible. Very easily accessible through all that, right? So let's just go back to the source code here, because that's how we can make sense of a lot of the stuff that we maybe don't understand. So another thing here, you know, maybe, you know, you see this line here, you're like, if it's Windows, I get this means if it's Windows, but what is socket.ip proto_IP, right? Well, I can search for that. And let me show you another way to search within the documentation as well. We could also search in this quick search bar, right, for IP proto_IP, and that will take us directly back to this page where we already were. So we look for that. We can see, okay, here's an example, right? And it says this next example shows us how to write a very simple network sniffer with raw sockets on Windows. So that's kind of tipping you off that this is something that you would use on a Windows machine, and it requires administrator privileges. So specifically, you can see here, create a raw socket and bind it to the public interface. Okay, we see they're doing the socket bind, TCP here, IPv4, and then we see the socket IP proto_IP. So now we know, okay, this is something we're going to need to use when we're dealing with Windows boxes. So the other one was, for example, they had IP proto_ICMP. So look, we just Google that, right? Oh, okay, Linux, right? This is what we use for Linux, right? So if we come back here, we see if it's Windows, we use _IP, else it'll be a Linux box and we use ICMP. So here's how, without any explanation from the book, let's just assume the book didn't explain this stuff, we're finding out this information pretty easily, right? And when you're coding in the real world, you're going to need to look stuff up all the time. So this is actually a very important skill set to have. So now that we know that stuff, right, we can just keep going. Like maybe we didn't know what this receive all did. We could look that up and we'd find out, hey, it's for promiscuous mode, right? So basically, it will allow us to sniff all the packets, right? And so on and so forth. You guys probably get the idea at this point. But even something like this that looks super complicated, we'll be breaking down all this code in a future video, probably the next video on this channel. But even something like this, right? Just break it down. There's a lot going on, it seems like, but you know, if you break it down step by step, you'll see, okay, well, let's just look at this while loop here, right? We're setting the raw buffer variable, and we're going to use socket receive from, and we're going to specify all ports, right? Now, if we didn't know, like, well, this buffer really, right? The buffer is 65535, which corresponds to all the ports. Now, if we didn't know what this function does, that's something that we could look up as well, right? Because a lot of this stuff is abstracted away because we're reusing code that's already been built. And that's something you're always going to do if you're developing stuff, especially if you want to be able to really make use of what your languages have to offer, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. So that is a very important skill to understand, to be able to do. And we could do this with any library, right? Some libraries will have their own, outside of the Python documentation, their own documentation, right? So, for example, Beautiful Soup, I believe, is like that. Beautiful Soup, Python, right? Let's see. Here we go. Yep, Beautiful Soup for Read the Docs, right? They have their own site for it. And it's very good documentation. So it really depends, right? Like what libraries you're working with, like what modules. When I say libraries, I really mean modules, right? They're the same thing. That's the Python, what they call them in Python. But another interesting thing, I guess I'll just shout this out as well. If you install modules with pip, right, you could do pip list-v, and it'll show all the modules that you have installed on your system as well as where they're located. So you have these on your system as well. So you can go and you can, let's say we go to here, right? So now that we're here, we can see the modules say, okay, let's look into curl, right? We could go into curl and we can look at the file, right? And we now see the source code, so we can see how all this stuff is being implemented, you know, as much information as we want on it. We can see what imports it's using. Okay, it's importing sys and pycurl, so maybe we need to look at pycurl source code as well, right? So it's like an abstraction of an abstraction, right? And you can see, you can really, I mean, as much as you want to dive into this stuff, but really, you don't need to do this. All you need to do to understand, especially for the Black Hat Python book, is, you know, they'll explain a number of things, but the things that they don't explain, or they explained it once somewhere, and you just need a refresher, you know, look at the docs or just search some of this stuff on Google, and you can find the explanation for it. And honestly, I like how they've written this book a lot more than if they tried to explain every single line of code. That would be very tedious, and the book would be extremely long, and they probably wouldn't even wrote as many sections in it as they did. There's a lot of sections, a lot more really cool code that we have to write, as you guys will see as I keep coming out with these videos. Now, this video is getting a bit long here, but if you want to catch up on the other Black Hat Python videos, go ahead and check out the videos on screen now. And if there's anything that I didn't explain you don't know, well, now you know how to fish, right? You know how to find out the information for yourself. Maybe you're building some code of your own and you're hitting a roadblock, and you know, this could be a great solution to implementing whatever it is you're trying to implement. Now you'll know how to find this information. So yeah, hopefully this video was of help. Let me know any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you guys right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.